Captain Jake Morrison stared out the window of his ship as stars moved past like tiny lights in the darkness. His ship, the Liberty's Edge, was not the biggest or fastest in the galaxy. It was a human ship, which meant most aliens thought it was a joke. Jake did not care what they thought. He had a job to do. "Captain, we are getting close to the target area," said Lisa Carter from the pilot's seat. She was young, but good at flying. Her hands moved over the controls like she was playing. "Music. Good. Tony, how are the engines?" Jake asked. Tony Rodriguez looked up from his workstation. Oil stains covered his blue uniform. "Running fine, Captain. These old engines are tough. They might not be pretty, but they work." Dr. Amy Foster sat at her science station, reading data. On her screen, she was the smartest person Jake knew, but she was also kind. "The readings are strange out here," she said. "There is something big ahead of us." For 30 years, humans had been part of the Galactic Federation. Earth sent ships to explore space and trade with other worlds. But everyone knew humans were the weak ones, the funny ones. Other species had better technology, stronger weapons, and smarter leaders. The Zephyrians were tall blue aliens who thought they were the best at everything. Their ships were fast, and their weapons were strong. The crystalline empire was made of rock-like beings who lived for thousands of years. They knew more about science than any human ever would. Humans were different. They were messy and loud. They fought with each other and made mistakes. But they also did things no other species could understand. They painted pictures that made no sense, but somehow felt right. They told jokes that were not logical, but still made people laugh. They solved problems in ways that should not work, but did. "There it is," Lisa said, pointing ahead. Through the front window, they could see something huge floating in space. It was a ship, but not like any ship they had ever seen. It was dark and covered in strange patterns. Parts of it looked broken, but other parts seemed to glow with a soft light. "How big is that thing?" Tony asked. Amy checked her instruments. "About 5 miles long, maybe longer." The readings are hard to understand. Jake felt excited but also scared. Finding a ship this old and strange was like finding treasure. But treasure could be dangerous. "Send a message to Earth," Jake said. "Tell them what we found. Then we go take a closer look." The ship got bigger as they moved toward it. Up close, they could see it was very old. The metal was dark and covered in marks that might have been writing, or art, or both. "I am not reading any life signs," Amy said, "but there is power inside. Very little, but it is there." "Can we go inside?" Jake asked. "There is air in some parts." "Old air, but we can breathe it with our suits on." Jake made his choice. "Lisa, bring us close to that opening there. Tony, get the suits ready. Amy, keep watching those readings. We are going aboard." 2 hours later, they were floating inside the alien ship. Their lights cut through the darkness, showing walls covered in the same strange patterns they had seen outside. The hallways were wide, like they were made for beings much bigger than humans. "This is amazing," Amy whispered. Her voice sounded small in the huge space. "These patterns are not just decoration. They are some kind of information storage." They moved deeper into the ship. Everything was quiet, except for the sound of their breathing and footsteps. Sometimes they heard soft sounds, like the ship was still alive somewhere deep inside. "Look at this," Tony said. He stood in front of a wall, covered in what looked like controls. But they were not buttons or switches like humans used. They were shapes that seemed to flow and change when he looked at them. Amy came over to study the wall. "This is not like anything I have ever seen. The technology is so advanced that I cannot even understand how it works." Jake was about to answer when his radio crackled to life. It was Admiral Ben Clark from Earth, Morrison reported. What did you find out there? It is big, Admiral. Really big and old. We think it might be from the Vanguard. There was silence on the radio. Everyone in the galaxy had heard stories about the Vanguard. They were supposed to be the first species to travel between stars. They had technology that could do impossible things. But they had disappeared long before any of the current species had learned to fly. Are you sure? Admiral Clark asked. No, sir, but this technology is unlike anything we have seen. Stay where you are. Do not touch anything else. The Galactic Council will want to know about this. Jake looked at his crew. They all had the same expression. They knew what this meant. The Council would send their best scientists and soldiers. They would take over and push the humans aside. Again, that night, as they waited in their ship next to the alien vessel, Jake could not sleep. He kept thinking about the patterns on the walls and the controls that seemed to move when no one was touching them. Amy was still awake too, studying the data they had collected. Jake, she said quietly, I think there is something special about this ship, something the other species might not understand. What do you mean? The patterns, they remind me of something. Like music or poetry, not just information, but feeling too. Jake nodded. He had felt it too. Walking through that ship was like walking through a dream. It made him think of things he could not explain. 3 days later, the Galactic Council ships arrived. Big, powerful vessels from the Crystalline Empire and the Zephyrian Fleet. They came with scientists and soldiers and leaders who thought they knew better than anyone else. Chancellor Veltar himself came aboard Jake's ship. He was tall and blue, with eyes that seemed to look right through people. Captain Morrison, he said in his deep voice, you will show us everything you found. Then you will return to Earth while the real scientists study this discovery. Jake wanted to argue, but he was just a human captain with an old ship and a small crew. What could he do against the most powerful species in the galaxy? He would soon find out. Dr. Amy Foster could not sleep. For 2 weeks, she had watched the alien scientists work on the Vanguard ship. They brought their best equipment and smartest people. They cut pieces off the walls. They ran tests with machines that cost more than Earth's entire space. Programmed. Nothing worked. Amy sat in her small room on the Liberty's edge, looking at the data she had collected on their first day aboard the ancient vessel. Something was wrong with how the other species were trying to understand the ship. They treated it like a machine. But Amy was starting to think it was something else. Can't sleep either? Jake asked from the doorway. The crystalline scientists have been working for 3 days just to open one door, Amy said. But when we were there, the doors seemed to open by themselves. Jake sat down across from her. I noticed that too. It was like the ship knew we were coming. Amy pulled up images on her computer. The strange patterns from the ship's walls filled the screen. Look at these symbols. The alien teams think they are just decoration. But what if they are not? What do you think they are? Messages, stories, maybe even emotions written down somehow. Jake leaned forward. That sounds crazy, does it? Humans write music that makes people feel things. We paint pictures that tell stories without words. What if the Vanguard did the same thing, but with technology? The next morning, Amy watched Chancellor Veltar give orders to his science teams. His voice was loud and angry. The great Vanguard ship was not giving up its secrets, and he did not like being embarrassed. Perhaps, Jake said quietly to Amy, we should take another look at those patterns you found. Amy nodded. She had been thinking the same thing. Back on Earth, Admiral Ben Clark was having his own problems. Reports were coming in from all over human space. Old alien artifacts that had been ignored for years were suddenly getting attention. Museums were finding items in their storage rooms that looked similar to what the Liberty's Edge had discovered Dr. Kate Williams called him from the research station on Mars. "Admiral, you need to see this. We have been studying some old artifacts. Here, things that other species said were worthless. But when our people touch them, they react. React how? They light up, they make sounds. Sometimes they even move." Admiral Clark felt a chill. "Dr. Williams, I want you to gather everything you can find, and keep this quiet." At the same time, Commander Rick Taylor was working on a space station near Jupiter. He was an engineer, not a scientist, but he knew how things worked. When he heard about the discoveries, he started looking through the station's storage areas. He found a small metal cube that had been there for 20 years. No one knew what it was. The alien traders who sold it said it was just a pretty rock. But when Rick picked it up, it started to glow. "What the hell?" he whispered. The cube felt warm in his hands. Patterns began to appear on its surface. They looked just like the ones Dr. Foster had found on the Vanguard ship. Back at the alien vessel, the Council scientists were getting angry. They had tried everything: cutting tools, energy weapons, computer codes, even telepathy. The ship just sat there, dark and silent. But Amy noticed something. When the aliens got frustrated and left for the day, sometimes lights would flicker in the ship's windows, like it was waiting for them to go away. "Jake," she said one evening, "I want to go back inside. The Council said we have to stay away. The Council is not getting anywhere. Maybe we can help." Jake looked at his crew. Tony was nodding. Lisa was already checking her equipment. "Okay," he said. "But if we get caught, we are all in big trouble." They waited until the alien teams went back to their ships for the night. Then they put on their suits and flew over to the Vanguard vessel. As soon as they entered the same airlock they had used before, things were different. Lights came on in the hallways. The air felt warmer. The patterns on the walls seemed to pulse with a soft glow. "It knows we are here," Tony whispered. They walked through the corridors, following the lights that seemed to guide them deeper into the ship. Amy felt like she was being led somewhere important. They came to a large room they had not seen before. In the center was something that looked like a chair, but it was made of the same flowing metal as the walls. Patterns covered every surface, swirling and moving like living things. "Amy," Jake said, "I think you should sit down." "What?" "Why? I don't know. It just feels right." Amy looked at the chair. It did feel right somehow, like it had been waiting for her. She sat down carefully. The moment she touched the chair, everything changed. Images filled her mind. Not pictures, but feelings and ideas. She saw stars being born and planets forming. She saw the Vanguard as they really were, not alien monsters, but people who looked and thought a lot like humans. They had explored the galaxy long before any of the current species had learned to make fire. They had built amazing things and learned incredible secrets. But most importantly, they had left everything behind for someone special to find. Someone who could think like they did. Someone who could feel what they felt. Someone who could understand that the universe was not just a machine to be taken apart, but a song to be sung. "Amy!" Jake's voice sounded far away. "Amy, are you okay?" She opened her eyes. The room was filled with light now. The patterns on the walls were moving faster, like they were excited. And Amy understood what they were saying. "They have been waiting," she said, her voice full of wonder. "Who has been waiting?" "The Vanguard. They have been waiting for us. For humans. We are the only ones who can use their technology, because we are the only ones who think like they did." Tony stepped closer. "What do you mean?" Amy stood up from the chair. Her mind was still full of new ideas and impossible knowledge. Other species think in straight lines. They solve problems step by step, But humans jump around. We guess. We feel our way through things. We make connections that should not make sense, but do. And that matters? The vanguard technology is not just advanced. It is alive. It responds to creativity and emotion and intuition, things that most species think are weaknesses. But for humans, they are strengths. Suddenly, alarms started going off. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside. The council ships, Jake said. They know we are here. But Amy was not worried anymore. She touched the wall next to the chair, and the patterns under her hand began to move. Throughout the ship, systems that had been dead for thousands of years started to wake up. Let them come, Amy said with a smile. I think it is time to show the galaxy what humans can really do. Outside, Chancellor Valtar watched in shock as the ancient Vanguard ship came to life. Lights ran along its hull like lightning. Parts that had seemed broken began to move and reshape themselves. And deep inside the ship, 4 humans stood in a room full of impossible technology, finally understanding that they were not the weakest species in the galaxy. They were the inheritors of the strongest. The Vanguard ship was singing. Amy could hear it in her mind. Not words, but feelings that somehow made sense. The ancient vessel was happy to be awake again after sleeping for so long. More than that, it was excited to finally meet the species it had been waiting for. This is impossible, Chancellor Veltar said through the radio. His voice was angry and confused. That ship has been dead for millennia. Our best scientists could not activate even the simplest systems. Jake looked at Amy, who was still touching the wall patterns. Her eyes were closed, and she was smiling like she was listening to beautiful music. Maybe your scientists were trying too hard, he said. Through the ship's windows, they could see the council vessels moving closer. Their weapons were not aimed at the Vanguard ship yet, but Jake knew that could change quickly. Amy, he said, gently, we need to go. Now, she opened her eyes. They seemed brighter than before, like she had seen something wonderful. No, Jake, we need to stay. The ship wants to show us something. The floor beneath their feet began to glow. Patterns spread outward from where Amy stood, racing along the walls and ceiling. The room filled with a soft humming sound that felt good in their bones. Tony stumbled backward. What is happening? The ship is connecting with us, Amy said. Her voice sounded different, calmer and more sure than Jake had ever heard it. It is showing us how to use Vanguard technology. Images appeared in the air around them, not on screens, but floating like solid light. They showed star maps and technical drawings and mathematical formulas that hurt to look at. But somehow, Amy understood all of it. There are more ships, she said, pointing at one of the floating images. Hundreds of them, hidden all over the galaxy. The Vanguard left them for us to find. Lisa was studying the star map. These locations, I recognize some of them. They are near human colonies. The Vanguard planned this, Amy continued. They knew that someday a species like them would evolve. They left their technology for us to inherit. The radio crackled again. This time it was Admiral Clark calling from Earth. Morrison, what is your status? The Council is demanding answers. Jake looked at his crew. They were scared but also excited. They had stumbled onto something that would change everything. Admiral, we are fine, but we have made some discoveries. Big ones. Report. The Vanguard technology responds to human minds. We can operate systems that the Council scientists could not even turn on. There was a long silence. Then Admiral Clark spoke again, and his voice was very serious. Morrison, I need you to listen carefully. Strange things are happening all over human space. Artifacts are activating. Old equipment is starting to work. Dr. Williams found something that built a machine by itself. Amy stepped away from the wall. The patterns followed her, spreading across her hands like living tattoos. "It is starting," she said. "The awakening." Before Jake could ask what she meant, the ship shuddered. Through the windows, they could see one of the council vessels firing a warning shot. "Human ship," came Chancellor Veltar's voice, cold and threatening. "You will exit that vessel immediately and return to your designated position. Any interference with this archaeological site will be considered an act of aggression." Jake was about to respond when Amy touched a new section of the wall. Suddenly, the ancient ship moved out. It was not like any movement they had felt before. The massive vessel turned and accelerated without any sense of inertia. Jake and his crew should have been thrown against the walls, but instead they felt like they were standing still while the universe moved around them. "Warning shots, really?" Amy said with a laugh that did not sound quite like her own voice. "Let me show them what a real ship can do." The Vanguard vessel flowed through space like water. It dodged between the council ships so fast that their weapons could not track it. Then it stopped, hanging motionless in front of Chancellor Veltar's flagship. "How?" Veltar whispered over the open channel. Amy pressed her palm against a large section of patterns. "Because we understand something you do not. Technology is not just about logic and rules. It is about connection. About working with the universe instead of trying to control it." She closed her eyes again, and Jake felt something impossible happen. For just a moment, he could sense the thoughts of his crew. Tony's excitement about the engines. Lisa's joy at flying something so graceful. Amy's wonder at touching minds that had existed before their son was born. They were connected, not just to each other, but to the ship itself. "This is what the Vanguard discovered," Amy said, opening her eyes. "True technology does not just use energy and matter. It uses consciousness, emotion, the spark that makes thinking beings more than just complicated machines." The council ships were trying to surround them, but it was like trying to catch lightning with a net. Every time they moved into position, the Vanguard ship was somewhere else. "Enough!" Chancellor Veltar shouted. "You will surrender that technology immediately or face the consequences." Jake opened a channel to all the council ships. "Chancellor, with respect, this technology does not belong to you. It never did. The Vanguard left it for the species that could understand it." "And you think that species is humanity?" Veltar's laugh was cold. "You are children playing with tools you cannot comprehend." Amy smiled and touched another section of the wall. This time, the entire ship began to change. The hull flowed like liquid metal, reshaping itself. Parts that had looked broken reformed into new configurations. Weapon ports opened along the sides, but they did not look like normal weapons. They pulsed with patterns similar to the ones inside the ship. "We are not children," Amy said quietly. "We are the inheritors." Back on Earth, Admiral Clark was watching reports flood in from every human world. The artifacts were not just activating, they were building things. Creating new devices the human engineers had only dreamed of. And all of it was happening faster than should be possible. Dr. Kate Williams called from Mars. "Admiral, you need to see this. The artifact I found. It has built what looks like a manufacturing facility. And it is asking for human operators." Commander Rick Taylor reported from Jupiter Station. "Sir, the device here just opened a doorway. Not to another room, to another star system. I can see a planet on the other side." Admiral Clark realized what was happening. Across human space, the Vanguard inheritance was revealing itself. Technology that had waited in silence for generations was finally finding the minds it could work with. But he also knew what this meant. The balance of power in the galaxy was about to change completely, and the other species would not accept that quietly. All human vessels, He broadcast on the emergency channel. "This is Admiral Clark. Prepare for possible hostile action from Council forces. Protect the Vanguard sites at all costs." In the asteroid field, Jake watched more Council ships arrive. They came from every major species: Crystalline Empire heavy cruisers, Zephyrian attack squadrons, and others he did not recognize. "They are scared," Amy said. She was still connected to the ship, and her awareness had expanded beyond the local area. They can sense that something fundamental has changed. "Can we fight them all?" Tony asked. Amy looked at him with eyes that held knowledge from another age. "Tony, we do not need to fight them. We need to show them what happens when you try to fight the universe itself." She placed both hands on the central control surface. The patterns exploded outward in waves of light. Throughout the galaxy, every Vanguard artifact began to sing the same song. Ancient manufacturing facilities, hidden in asteroid belts, came online. Doorways opened between distant star systems. Ships that had slept in the void for millions of years opened their eyes and remembered their purpose. And on every human world, people who had never seen technology like this before found that they could understand it perfectly. The age of humanity. As the galaxy's joke was ending, the age of humanity as the galaxy's inheritors had begun. War Admiral Kexthul of the Void Hunters had destroyed 17 worlds in his career. His fleet was the most feared force in the galaxy. When the Galactic Council ordered him to blockade Earth and force humanity to surrender the Vanguard technology, he thought it would be easy. He was wrong. "Report." Kexthul growled from the bridge of his massive warship. His species looked like walking nightmares, all black scales and glowing red eyes. They had conquered half the galaxy through pure violence. "Sir, our scouts report that Earth has 12 human vessels defending the system. All of them appear to be using Vanguard technology." Kexthul laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. 12 ships against my fleet of 300? This will be over quickly." On Earth, Admiral Ben Clark stood in the command center on Luna Station, watching the enemy fleet approach. Around him, officers worked at stations that looked nothing like they had a week ago. The Vanguard technology had changed everything. "Admiral," Commander Sarah Kim reported from her new ship, the Phoenix Rising. "We have visual contact with the Void Hunter fleet. They are moving into attack formation." Sarah's voice came through perfectly clear, even though her ship was 3,000,000 miles away. The Vanguard communication systems made distance meaningless. "Understood, Commander. Remember the plan. Let them make the first move." Admiral Clark looked at the tactical display. It showed not just the enemy ships, but their emotional states, their likely intentions, even their weak points. The Vanguard technology did not just track objects. It understood them. Captain Alex Turner was piloting another of the new human ships near Mars. He had been a good pilot before, but now he felt like part of his vessel. When he thought about turning left, the ship turned left. When he wanted to go faster, it accelerated. It was like flying in a dream. "This is incredible," he said to his crew. "I can feel their ships. They are angry and confident. They think we are going to run away. Are we?" asked his engineer. Alex smiled. "Not exactly." Back at the asteroid field, Jake and his crew were still aboard the original Vanguard ship. Amy had become something more than human, not different, but enhanced. She could sense events happening across the entire galaxy. "The battle is starting," she told Jake. "Kexthul is attacking with his full fleet. Can we help?" "We are helping. Every human ship is connected now. We share knowledge, tactics, even courage. When one of us learns something, we all learn it." Jake felt it then, a warm sensation in his mind that told him he was not alone. Somewhere, hundreds of human pilots were preparing to face impossible. Odds, and they were all connected to each other and to him. The first shots came without warning. Kextul's ships opened fire with weapons that could turn planets into dust. The energy beams reached out toward the human vessels like fingers of death. They hit nothing. Commander, Sarah Kim's ship was suddenly somewhere else, several thousand miles from where it had been a second before. The same thing happened to all. 12 human vessels. They appeared in new positions, having moved without crossing the space in between. Impossible, Kextul snarled. No ship can move that fast. Captain Alex Turner's voice came over the tactical channel. We are not moving fast, Admiral. We are moving smart. The human ships began their counterattack, but they did not use normal weapons. Instead, they fired something that looked like controlled lightning. When the energy hit the Void Hunter vessels, strange things happened. One enemy ship suddenly forgot how to fire its weapons. Another found that its engines would only work backward. A third began broadcasting poetry instead of military commands. What is happening to my fleet? Kextul roared. On Luna Station, Admiral Clark watched the battle with amazement. The Vanguard weapons do not destroy, he said to his staff. They confuse. They turn strength into weakness. Dr. Amy Foster's voice came through the communication system from the asteroid field. The Vanguard never believed in destroying their enemies. They believed in teaching them that fighting was pointless. More Void Hunter ships fell victim to the human weapons. Their targeting systems began to see rainbows instead of enemy vessels. Their communication arrays started playing music. Their navigation computers decided that up was down and left was right. Kextul ordered his reserve fleet to attack. 200 more ships appeared at the edge of the solar system, moving at full speed toward Earth. That was when the human ships revealed their real capability. Commander Sarah Kim closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. She could feel every human pilot in the system. She could sense their determination, their courage, their absolute refusal to let Earth be threatened. All ships, she said quietly, link with me. The 12 human vessels suddenly moved as one. Not like a fleet following orders, but like parts of a single organism. They flowed through space in patterns that made no sense to conventional tactics, but somehow worked perfectly. The Void Hunter reinforcements found themselves fighting not 12 ships, but one ship with 12 bodies. Every time they fired at one target, it was protected by the others. Every weakness they tried to exploit was covered by seamless coordination. Captain Alex Turner felt his consciousness merge with his fellow pilots. He could see through their eyes, think with their minds, fight with their courage. It was terrifying and wonderful at the same time. We are more than the sum of our parts, he whispered. The battle turned into something that had never been seen before in galactic history. The human ships did not just defeat their enemies, they converted them. Void Hunter vessels found their weapon systems reprogrammed to fire flowers instead of death rays. Their engines were modified to only work at peaceful speeds. Their computers were filled with human art and music and poetry. Kextul watched his mighty fleet turn into a cosmic joke. His warships were dancing instead of fighting. His soldiers were laughing instead of roaring for blood. This is not possible, he said, his voice small and confused. Amy's voice reached him across the void, gentle but firm. War Admiral, you have spent your life believing that strength comes from destroying others. But true strength comes from building something better. The Void Hunter flagship shuddered as the human weapons found their mark. But instead of exploding, it began to bloom. The dark metal hull sprouted gardens. The weapon ports became windows. The engine exhaust turned into streams of harmless light. Kextul found himself standing in what had been his war room, but was now something like a park. Trees grew where his tactical displays had been. Flowers covered the walls. And in Center of it all, a fountain played music that sounded like hope. "What have you done to my ship?" he asked. "We have shown you what it could be," Amy replied. "The choice of what to do next is yours." Around the solar system, 300 Void Hunter ships hung in space, transformed from instruments of war into works of art. Their crews were unharmed, but confused, trying to understand what had happened to them. On Earth, Admiral Clark received reports from across human space. Similar battles were happening in every human world, and everywhere the results were the same. Enemy fleets were not destroyed, but transformed. The galaxy's most powerful military force had been defeated not by superior weapons, but by superior imagination. Commander Sarah Kim opened her eyes and found herself back in her own body, in her own ship, but she could still feel the connection to her fellow pilots. It was weaker now, but it was permanent. "Admiral Clark," she reported, "the immediate threat has been neutralized. But this is just the beginning. The Council will send more ships." "Let them come," Admiral Clark replied. "We are ready for whatever they bring." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. This was not about military victory anymore. The human race had just demonstrated capabilities that challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Technology and the nature of power itself. The other species would have to choose: adapt to this new reality, or face the consequences of fighting a war they could never win. In the asteroid field, Amy touched the Vanguard ship's controls one more time. Across the galaxy, more ancient facilities came online. More doorways opened between the stars. More sleeping ships woke up and remembered their purpose. The transformation of humanity was accelerating, and there was no going back. Chancellor Veltar stood in the ruins of his once mighty council chamber. Half the member species had withdrawn from the Federation after the defeat of Kexthal's fleet. The other half were arguing about whether to surrender or fight to the death. "This is madness," he said to the remaining delegates. Humans were nothing 6 months ago. They had weak ships, small colonies, and no real military power. How can they suddenly control half the galaxy? The Crystalline Empire's representative, a being made of living rock, spoke with a voice like grinding stone. "Perhaps we underestimated them, Chancellor. Perhaps we always underestimated them." Through the chamber's great windows, they could see human ships in orbit around the Council's home world. They were not warships in any traditional sense. They looked more like works of art, flowing, graceful vessels that seemed to dance between the stars. Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Eternal Defiance. It was larger than the Liberty's Edge, but felt just as comfortable. The Vanguard technology had given humanity ships that were extensions of their crews' minds and hearts. "Admiral Morrison," came a voice from Earth. It was Admiral Clark, who had been promoted to fleet commander for all human forces. "The Council has requested a meeting. They want to discuss terms." Jake smiled. 3 months ago, he had been a captain of a small survey ship. Now he was an admiral, commanding a fleet that could appear anywhere in the galaxy instantly. The change still felt like a dream. "What kind of terms?" he asked. "Surrender terms?" "They want to know what we plan to do with our new power." Dr. Amy Foster materialized next to Jake. Not walked up, materialized. The Vanguard technology had given some humans abilities that seemed like magic. Amy could now exist in multiple places at once, connecting different parts of human space through her consciousness. "The Council is afraid," she said. "They think we will do to them what they would do to us." And what would that be? Conquer, enslave, rule through fear. Amy's expression was sad. They cannot imagine that someone with great power might choose not to use it for domination. Jake looked out at the Council ships that surrounded the human fleet. They were keeping their distance, but had their weapons ready. They expected a fight to the death. Instead, Jake opened a communication channel to all ships in the system. "This is Admiral Morrison of the human fleet. I want to speak to Chancellor Veltar and any other council leaders who are listening." A few moments later, Veltar's image appeared on Jake's screen. The blue alien looked older than before, worn down by months of defeats and disasters. "Admiral Morrison, I assume you are here to dictate terms for our surrender." "Actually, Chancellor, I am here to make you an offer." Veltar's eyes narrowed. "What kind of offer?" Jake gestured to Amy, who stepped forward. When she spoke, her voice carried to every ship in the system, human and alien alike. "The Vanguard left us their technology, but they also left us their wisdom. They learned that the universe is too big and too wonderful for any one species to control. They discovered that true strength comes from cooperation, not conquest." "Pretty words," Veltar said coldly. "But you have the power to destroy us all. Why should we believe you will not use it?" "Because," Jake said, "we are going to prove it to you." He touched a control on his ship's interface. Throughout the system, the human vessels began to change. Weapon ports closed. Defense systems powered down. The ships became completely vulnerable. "What are you doing?" one of the council commanders shouted over the radio. "We are showing you that we trust you to make the right choice," Amy replied. "We could force you to join us. We could make you serve us. But the Vanguard taught us that forced cooperation is not cooperation at all." On the Council's home world, delegates watched in amazement as the human fleet made itself defenseless. It was the most insane military decision any of them had ever seen. It was also the most powerful. "You see," Jake continued, "we do not want to rule the galaxy. We want to explore it, to learn from it, to build something better than what came before." The communication channel filled with voices. Some alien commanders were urging their leaders to attack while the humans were defenseless. Others were calling for restraint. Chancellor Veltar was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "And if we refuse your offer? If we choose to fight?" Amy's image flickered, and suddenly she was standing on the bridge of Veltar's ship, right next to him. He jumped backward in surprise. "Then you will find," she said gently, "that our weapons work just as well when our defenses are down. The difference is that we would rather use them to protect than to conquer." She gestured to the walls around them. Patterns began to appear, the same flowing designs that covered Vanguard technology, but these patterns were different. They showed images of cooperation instead of conflict. Scenes of different species working together, learning from each other, building wonders that no single race could create alone. "This is what the Vanguard dreamed of," Amy said. "A galaxy where strength comes from diversity, where problems are solved through creativity rather than force, where the weak are protected by the strong instead of consumed by them." Veltar stared at the patterns. Despite himself, he was moved by what he saw. "And you believe humanity can create this dream?" "Not just humanity." Jake's voice came through the ship's communication system. "All of us, together." Amy extended her hand to the Chancellor. "The Vanguard technology responds to consciousness and emotion. It grows stronger when different minds work together. We can share it with any species that chooses cooperation over conquest, but humanity would still be in control." "No," Amy said with a smile. "The technology would be in control. And the technology wants to create, not destroy. To build, not tear down. To unite, not divide." Other voices began to join the conversation. Dr. Kate Williams reported from the research facility on Mars, where alien scientists were working alongside humans to understand Vanguard manufacturing techniques. Commander Rick Taylor described the trade routes that were already forming between human and alien worlds. Using Vanguard Transportation Systems. Captain Alex Turner spoke from his ship near the edge of the system. Chancellor, I have been to 12 different worlds in the past month. On every one, I found species that were tired of the old ways, tired of fighting for scraps when we could be building abundance. The patterns on Veltar's ship walls began to pulse with soft light. The Vanguard technology was responding to the emotions of everyone in the system. Hope, fear, curiosity, and determination all mixed together. What guarantee do we have, Veltar asked, that humanity will keep its promises? Jake's image appeared, next to Amy on the Chancellor's bridge. The same guarantee you have always had, Chancellor. Our actions. Judge us by what we do, not what we say. Around the system, human ships began to activate their manufacturing systems. But instead of building weapons, they created gifts. Medicine for plague-ridden worlds. Terraforming equipment for dead planets. Art and music and stories from human culture. And most importantly, they built communication devices that would allow alien species to connect with the growing human network, not as subjects or servants, but as partners. 3 days later, the Crystalline Empire became the first alien species to officially join the new Galactic Cooperative. Their representative explained their decision simply. We have studied Vanguard technology for millennia and learned nothing. In 3 days working with humans, we have learned more than in all our previous centuries combined. Other species followed. Not all of them. Some chose to retreat to distant parts of the galaxy, unwilling to accept the new order. But most recognized that the universe had changed, and they could either change with it or be left behind. Chancellor Veltar himself came aboard the Eternal Defiance for the signing ceremony. As he walked through the ship's corridors, he marveled at how different it was from anything he had ever seen. The walls showed views of distant stars. The air carried the scent of growing things. Music played softly in the background, not human. Music, but melodies created by the ship itself. It is beautiful, he admitted to Jake as they reached the main conference room. Wait until you see what we can build together, Jake replied. The ceremony was simple. No grand speeches or elaborate rituals. Just representatives from dozens of species agreeing to try something new, to work together instead of against each other, to explore the galaxy as partners rather than competitors. Amy stood at the center of the room, her consciousness connected to Vanguard facilities across the galaxy. Through her, every human ship and station was present at the ceremony. Through the network, their allies were connected as well. The Vanguard waited 1,000,000 years for this moment, she said. Today, the galaxy takes its first step toward becoming what it was always meant to be. Outside the ship, the stars seemed brighter than before. And in the distance, more Vanguard facilities were coming online, ready to help their inheritors build something worthy of the vast, wonderful universe they all shared. Earth had stopped being a joke. But more importantly, the galaxy had stopped being a battleground. It had become a home.